Right, the meeting of the Water Quality Management Committee will come to order. We have a very short agenda this week, and it is basically to present to the public and to next week to the selectmen the draft Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan that this committee has been working on for 6 months and this town has been working on for several years. Quorum being present, and any other official business before we get into this? I don't think so. No? Okay, fine. Let's get into the presentation. We'll take questions and comments at the end, though I would caution people that the questions and comments will be heard but not acted on by this group. This work is done as far as we're concerned. It's going to the selectmen next week, and questions and comments should be addressed to them at that point. But we're happy to hear them tonight to maybe give them a little heads up to what people are concerned about. Anyway, let's start with the presentation. This is all about Falmouth estuaries. And Falmouth has more estuaries than any other town in Massachusetts. We have 14 estuaries of significance, ranging from Waquoit in the far eastern corner, all around the coast to Quissit, to West Falmouth Harbor, all the way up to Megansett Harbor. These water bodies are key to this town's identity, and they always have been. They're focused for our recreational activities, for fishing activities, for boating, home building, as we'll find out later, passive enjoyment. They define this town in a way that nothing else does, and protecting them and enhancing the water quality of these water bodies is probably the most important thing we can do for ourselves in this coming decade and decades to come. The estuaries we have are in serious trouble, and over the last 50 years we have built roads and jetties, we have tripled our population, we have built thousands of homes as close as we could get them to the estuaries. We have built malls and motels and acres of pavement. And we took one estuary to give you an example of just how striking the change has been. To the left is Little Pond in 1950. Little Pond is the next one over, thank you. As you can see, aside from a few houses down in the southern section of the heights, the whole northern part of the heights all the way up is empty. Above that, there's a gravel pit. Above that is a cranberry bog. Over on the other side, in Mara Vista, empty. A few houses scattered here and there. In the southern portion, there's a few more, largely seasonal. That's what you had here in 1950. Fast forward to 2009. Every house lot, almost every house lot without exception, is built on, both on the Heights side and on the Mara Vista side. The northern section, where there used to be a cranberry bog, is now Falmouth Mall. You can look at that and you can realize how much has changed here and how fast. And that's 50 years. That estuary and all the estuaries are suffering from excess nitrogen. I mean, that is the major ingredient that is causing the decline of these estuaries. Where does it come from? Principal sources are septic systems. Everyone in almost all of these estuaries is on a home septic system, which involves a cesspool or a septic tank, neither one of which holds back much nitrogen. So whatever water goes into the cesspool or septic tank continues on until it gets to an estuary where it produces all kinds of ill effects that we'll get into in a minute. Fertilizer, lawn fertilizer, is another huge impact, not as big as septic systems, but it's very large. Road runoff is another large impact. All these things contribute nitrogen directly into these estuaries, which contributes to their evident decline. At least 75% of the non-atmospheric nitrogen input comes from septic systems. When we say non-atmospheric, the point of that is some nitrogen comes by way of the air. power plants in the Midwest put nitrogen into the air. It comes over us, it rains, it comes down into our town, into our estuaries. But most of it, we can't blame on the Midwest and the power plants. We have to blame on our own activities. So why do you want to remove the nitrogen? Why do we all want to remove the nitrogen? It kills fish. It's ruining much of the habitat for the fish and the shellfish and all the other sea life that we like to think we support here. Worse than that, it creates algae blooms. We've seen this in several of the estuaries, quite a few of them, which leads directly to a loss of recreational desirability and not to mention odors. It impacts real estate values. Letting these estuaries die, as we have been doing for the last 50 years, slowly but surely, is what we have done and what we can no longer continue to do. How much nitrogen do you have to remove? This is a chart that we'll skip over quickly because it takes a fair amount of conversation, but it basically tells you that you have to remove a lot of the nitrogen that comes out of wastewater. The fertilizer and the other impacts are significant, but the big one is the wastewater from our homes and our businesses. So in the past, this has been studied, and the town in 2007 commissioned a Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, which resulted in a report in 2009. That report suggested, in fact recommended, that for starters, we should sewer all the residences south of Route 28 on all the peninsulas in East Falmouth, from Wacoit to Falmouth Heights, involving approximately 8,000 residences and businesses. That was step one in that proposal. Step two was to sewer thousands more homes and businesses north of 28. The price tag that was put on that proposal was $600 million. The areas they recommended are shown in color here, all the way from the Heights, all the way to Wacoit, and not in color, but encompassed in that proposal were more houses and businesses north of 28. So a huge section of the town, all to be sewered at a cost of $600 million. As you see from the headline here, the selectmen, in their wisdom, rejected that report. $600 million was not a number that this town was prepared to invest in anything, much less, even something so important as cleaning up the estuaries. Instead of accepting that report and sending it on to the DEP, they created a new committee, the review committee, which included members like Virginia Valiela, Peter Boyer, Doug Brown, Pat Favoli, George Hoyfelder, Priscilla Moore, Steve Rafferty, myself, John Waterbury. Steve Fassett has apparently been on every wastewater committee there's ever been, and he was on these ones too. And Jerry Patamus, who has been to every meeting that there's ever been, including this one too tonight. That was the review committee that was appointed, was it 2009 or early 2010? 2009. Okay. The review committee took a new approach to this whole thing. We did not accept that town-wide sewering was the best solution or the only solution for the estuaries. We made a number of recommendations, which included assessing all the possible alternatives in greater detail. We conceded that sewering was going to be part of the solution, but not the only part. And hopefully, as technology and other options developed, not the major part. But the premise was sewering would still have to be part of the solution. The review committee was pretty clear that sewering north of Route 28 was nothing that we were prepared to recommend the town do now or in the foreseeable future. Their proposal had a new treatment plant being built out at the Mass Military Reservation, in addition to the one we have here now in West Falmouth. That committee recommended that not be done, that the existing wastewater treatment plant had enough capacity to handle the foreseeable future, and we didn't see the need to have two. The other thing that the committee recommended, and this current committee also recommends, is that whatever funding, whatever this project is going to cost, that it be done without increasing taxes, which doesn't mean we don't spend public money on it. It just means that we take opportunities when previous bonds have been paid off. New bonds could be issued without increasing taxes. And Virginia Valiella will talk about this in great detail further on down the line here. Anyway, the final report of the review committee came up with a proposal that was about half the cost of the previous proposal, $320 million. It proposed only sewering from the heights over to Seacoast Shores. Am I right? That's the line?
Yes.
Not beyond into the less developed areas of Wacoit, not north of 28. And keep going. Okay, so that report was sent to the selectmen and to the town meeting, and the response was that the selectmen unanimously approved those recommendations. It went to town meeting, and the April town meeting of last year, the town meeting unanimously voted to bond $2.7 million to study sewering and alternatives, as the review committee had recommended. Because it was an increase of taxes, it had to go to the voters, and the voters passed that bonding in every precinct by a 2-to-1 margin. This almost never happens when you ask the voters to expend this kind of money. But it happened in this town because the voters agreed with the town meeting and with the selectmen and with the review committee that this was our top priority and we were going to do it and we were going to do it right. So here's what town meeting told us in detail. First of all, aquaculture. We're going to hear about aquaculture later, but that was a mandate from town meeting to study that and to put on a demonstration project to see how it could address the nitrogen problem. Boynes Pond, Little Pond inlet widening, permeable reactive barriers, road runoff remediation in Little Pond, eco toilets, an engineering plan for preliminary design of sewers. These were all on the town meeting's list of things that we were going to do with the money they voted. In addition, the town meeting said we're going to form a water quality management committee, which is sitting here before you, who was charged with drafting a comprehensive wastewater management plan and to oversee these demonstration projects. It was also mandated that we collect baseline data. You want to know exactly what the condition is before you start experimenting, because otherwise you don't know what effect your experiment has had. We were also mandated to prepare a comprehensive wastewater management plan for Oyster Pond, and to fund studies, the final studies of Quistit Harbor, Falmouth Harbor, and Salt Pond. So this is the new committee. It's sitting before you here. I'm Eric Turkington. I'm the chairman. We have Steve Rafferty, who is the vice chairman. He's also a member of the Board of Health and vice president of Camp Dresser McGee, one of the and
All
Smith.
devices covered.
Now Smith now. But one of the most prestigious and well-regarded companies in this business. So he brings wonderful expertise to the table. Wynn Monroe is a longtime resident of Wacoit, also a economist with a PhD and a financial planner. He spent many years with the state of New York, working with them on economic analysis of energy projects. Ron Zweig here, or I like to say, he advises countries on shellfish propagation and nitrogen removal and that sort of thing. He is a world-renowned expert in this field, and we are lucky to have him with us. Virginia Valiella needs no introduction, I hope, at this point, to anybody in town. She's been a selectman here for years. In the past, she's been tireless in her efforts to make this town a better place. And when she retired as executive director of the New Bedford Solid Waste District, this last year we now have 100% of her time, and we're getting it all. Matt Patrick, again, needs no introduction in this town. He's a former selectman, former state representative, and currently the executive secretary of the Westport River Watershed Alliance.
Executive Director.
Executive director. Jeez. And Steve over here is an engineer, has worked at the NBL. He has been a biological engineer at the National Institute of Health in Washington, and we haven't gotten all of his time because he has a very fine sailboat that he's been using as much as he can this year, but we're getting plenty of help from him. So this is the group that has spent the last 6 months. George Hoyfelder was a member here, but he resigned because of personal reasons. And Jerry, of course, has been part of this, he's been part of everything. But this is the group that has been working on preparing the report that we're rolling out tonight, which is a draft 20-year plan for the town of Falmouth to deal with wastewater and its effect on the estuaries. It includes a revised plan for sewering. Instead of proposing sewering all of East Falmouth, north and south of 28, or even proposing sewering the reduced version that the review committee had, which was south of 28 from the Heights over to Seacoast Shores, we're proposing an initial plan of the Little Pond lower watershed only. That's the half of the Heights that we talked about and the lower part of Mara Vista. Also in the plan is an adaptive management approach, which is that we look at every one of these other options that we're spending time and money on studying and measure their efficacy, measure their value in terms of how much nitrogen do they remove, how much does it cost, and how acceptable is it to the public to do it that way. And as these different options show their worth, we move them to the front of the line as far as what we want to do here in this town. So all of those demonstration projects are now in the process of happening. We have requests for proposals out on the street or close to being on the street for almost every one of them. There's more to this than you would think because, of course, they're all very complicated issues, and municipal funding is a complicated issue, but we're doing it. So that's moving along. The plan has a 40-year perspective on cleaning up the estuaries. This will not be done overnight. 40 years is optimistic. We have a lot of estuaries, and we have a lot of cleaning up to do. But 40 years is the plan here. With that, I'm going to turn us over to the advisor of countries, who will now tell you what he's advising the town of Falmouth to do about aquaculture.
You can do it. It's okay. Thanks. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah,
thank you very much. Yes, we've been looking into and exploring some possibilities to apply, particularly shellfish aquaculture, oyster culture as one type, the indigenous eastern oyster, and and also possibly quahogs as well as a combination factor in the various estuaries. And the notion is that these organisms are extremely effective in assimilating nitrogen through the basic food chain in the estuary. So we have the nitrogen coming in from the groundwater. Plankton will grow on the nitrogen. We know that's caused some problems. Other growth will happen. We'll get too much nitrogen in the estuaries, and the notion is to pull it out. And I've worked on projects where this has been done very effectively in creating even an integrated marine aquaculture approach, where you have fish culture and seaweed and as well as shellfish, but shellfish are particularly effective in this. The notion of the project, though, is that we will be looking at various options. An RFP is going to be put out, and the people who propose, or the groups that propose to be involved, will give basically a program. They'll develop a program and propose it to the town, to the committee initially, and we will then look at various aspects. In advance of that work, we are going to do some basic viability testing in Little Pond and Green Pond, just to see how they do. Hopefully we'll get them in this summer, and do a little bit of monitor, and there'll be a monitoring program that will ultimately accompany that. But that is a component that we'll look at. About 20 years ago, a similar test was done, and it was extremely successful, and the oysters grew very quickly and very effectively. However, it wasn't combined with the environmental monitoring and management that we will be ultimately doing in the future with the full demonstration. The viability testing will be a small-scale study. And then we'll be doing a review of the literature as well. That's pretty well established. Is rather robust amount of information, and then actually doing again the demonstration project. So this is something that would be that through calculations it looks like that even aquaculture could do a good part of the work. There are some risks, of course. There's disease. There's other things, but a lot of that can be adjusted. And there's good experience on Cape Cod, which is really important and can be directly applicable to structuring this. So I think I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Virginia Valiello, speaking about inlet widening.
Yes. Early in the study process of all of the estuaries, this being Bourne's Pond that you're looking at, the SMAST that had been hired by the Department of Environmental Protection to evaluate the health of the estuaries identified through modeling that two estuaries, Bourne's Pond and Little Pond, could have an improvement in water quality if the inlets were widened. Currently, the entire peninsula surrounding the watersheds for Bourne's Pond and Little Pond would have to be sewered to remove enough nitrogen to improve the water quality and meet the standards that we need to meet. So this alternative is being investigated. Next slide. It was funded, engineering was funded through Article 17, and a request for proposals is now been folded into an engineering, that Bourne's Pond engineering has been folded into a request for proposals. There are a lot of hurdles to accomplishing inlet widening. It has a very long permitting process because it has to go through the Massachusetts EPA, the Corps of Engineers, the Cape Cod Commission, the local Conservation Commission, and there are impacts that need to be evaluated in terms of how it would affect waterfront properties if the inlets were widened. It would be a fairly expensive project because you would be building a larger bridge across the inlets. The question would be whether that expense would be worthwhile as opposed to the sewering which had been proposed for the peninsulas surrounding these ponds. So that is one of the alternatives that we are currently going to investigate to develop numbers to give us an idea whether it's an alternative to pursue. Vineyard Sound does not have a very high tidal range. It's only about a foot. And so the amount of flushing, extra flushing that would occur if the inlets were widened would only really benefit the water in the lower end of the estuaries. It would not be a complete solution to the estuaries. We would have to do something else as well, or several alternatives at the same time in order to achieve a benefit. We are going to look at Bourne's Pond first because Barnstable County has expended some funds already to gather information for that particular inlet, and we're going to use that and build on that before we look at Little Pond.
Thank you, Virginia. Steve Rafferty on PRBs. First question is, what's a PRB?
Exactly. Well, just to build on what everybody's been saying, you've heard that some shellfish could be used in an estuary to help out. You've heard that we could get some of the mixing going on. You heard Eric describe the problem from people's wastewater systems and their septic systems. So one can reasonably say, is there a way to treat the nitrogen that gets into the groundwater in the groundwater? And in fact, we have the luxury in this town of a gentleman named Dr. Ken Foreman, who's done some experimental work already out in the Wacoit Bay area that you can see on the right-hand side, To the forefront of the slide, you can see some green algae growth. In the background, you see some sort of reddish area and less algae growth. And this is actually an in situ, what's called a permeable reactive barrier, which is a way of adding something into the ground that intercepts where the fresh groundwater is coming into the estuaries. There's a lot of variables on this. Where's the groundwater? How deep do you have to go? But the system at some level is fairly simple, which is the bacteria that exists does a lot of the work, whether you put it at your wastewater plant or you attach it into growing shellfish or doing other things, it's the bacteria. And the bacteria in the ground doesn't use up nitrogen because there's not enough carbon in the ground. So it's actually fairly simple at a scientific level, which is get some wood chips or other source of carbon down in the ground so the bacteria will break down the nitrogen and make the estuary cleaner. Something that sounds very simple, though, has not been applied very far because there's a lot of variables. But we've taken on going out and doing a request for proposals to ask people to look at two things. What we'd like them to do is, first off, look at these estuaries and the way the land is being used now and sort of conceptualize where would a barrier go in. Not every one of these peninsulas has, say, a street that's close to the water's edge. So we're hoping they can prioritize where some advantages or disadvantages are. And then from that, the next step would be, where's the best place to go a larger scale demonstration of what Dr. Ken Foreman demonstrated, and really put it in place and monitor its value, its cost, and its efficiency to see if it can get applied further. One of the things that's surfaced by the negotiations the town has been involved in over the last several months around the discharge permit for the existing wastewater plant and its impact upon West Falmouth watershed is the thought process that perhaps one of the places we should try a demonstration is on a portion of where the wastewater plant's plume is coming to the West Falmouth Harbor to see if that will help with those issues there. So I believe in the settlement agreement is that we will now do one in that watershed. So we are looking forward to, in the next year or so, identifying the best location, one down on the South Coast estuaries, one over in West Falmouth, and then proceeding forward to fund and see what we get. I have road runoff as well.
You're on a roll.
I am on a roll. Eric mentioned early on, there's several aspects to this. When it rains, not only is there the atmospheric deposition of nitrogen, but excess fertilizers on people's lawns will run out to the street. All of that gets down. The town has a separate program they have to do already under the EPA, which is looking at all of their fixed stormwater discharges. By that I mean the drains. We are piggybacking on top of that work specifically right now around the Little Pond area to see where opportunities exist. We are asking to take from where the town had looked at stormwater fixed discharges. We're going to have our consultant we got on board look a little further there for what's happening perhaps with the ground flow and whatnot. And then we're looking to, again, this is kind of an innovative process that we're doing here with the whole plan. Are there ideas out there, or are there things that we could adopt over the next 20 or 30 years, say as we rebuild streets or certain areas, redo things so we get more vegetation and can start to uptake nitrogen through vegetation along the roadway edge. And lastly, to add under that is, there's an exercise of how you fund this, so the town's cost of borrowing or funding is the most favorable cost, and it's called the SRF, or State Revolving Fund Loan. And we've been having a lot of conversations with the state about which one of these projects will or will not be funded under that mechanism. And we believe this can qualify under that as well.
Great. Matt Patrick, to talk about Echo Toilets.
Thank you, Eric. Jerry remarked that he was glad to see I dressed appropriately for tonight. I want you to know this is the most expensive T-shirt I have, Jerry. These are three examples of eco toilets, the fixture above, obviously, and below that, the floor, there is a receptacle that retains the waste. We're going to include denitrifying septic system technologies, and Wynn will speak to those in the next slide. We have a request for proposals for a demonstration project that is in process. With that demonstration project, as Eric mentioned earlier, we want to find out if eco-toilets can be retrofitted in existing homes cost-effectively. We also want to find out if people will accept that technology in their homes. And number 3, we want to find out how much nitrogen will remain in the gray water. And that's what we're going to need to prove to DEP that these are acceptable ways of, or eco-toilets is an acceptable method of meeting the TMDL. We also have a memorandum of agreement with Barnstable County Health Department, which George Hoyfelder runs, to analyze the performance at 62 sites in order to gain Mass DEP certification as nitrogen removal. That's where we're going to be testing the gray water to see how much nitrogen remains in the gray water. And we have an incentive program for residential and commercial installations of up to $5,300. And that can be used towards the installation. And we are currently accepting applications. So if anybody's out there and they want to try a composting toilet in their home, please get in touch with us. Thank you.
Great. Win.
Thank you very much, Eric. On on-site denitrifying septic systems, the reason we have this slide here is because that's a house that has an on-site, a house on Cape Cod, a regular salt box that has an on-site denitrifying septic system. It should be, you can't see it. You can't, it's not something that's very noticeable. That's the only reason we have this slide here, is just to show it isn't a noticeable thing to have to put in. On-site denitrifying, you have to place them in the context of, let us suppose that in an estuary, 2 or 3 years from now, we decide that we don't want to do sewering, or we want to do much less sewering than we did. What are we going to do instead? One other is eco-toilets, which Matt just talked about. Another would be on-site denitrifying septic systems, and there are other alternatives as well. But there are on Cape Cod already. We do not have a demonstration project for on-site denitrifying septic systems in our plans, because already on Cape Cod, the Barnstable County Health Department is analyzing the results of installing and managing almost 1,500 denitrifying septic systems today. I'm told that the results of that at present are that the average removal of nitrogen is 50%, 77% of the time. They got it up to 77% of the time. That's not good enough for us, but fortunately, a number of the systems are doing much better than that, and many systems can be made to do better than they're doing today. Secondly, at the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center, which you may want to visit someday, it's a nice place to go, you can see lots of denitrifying septic systems in the ground, actually operating on a test basis there. And some of those are getting very much more than 50%. They're getting in the range of 80, 90, 95% nitrogen removal at some type of reasonable cost, or estimated to be some type of reasonable cost. So we have a lot of information. We can use the Barnstable County Health Department statistics. We can use the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center results. And we can go to DEP and talk with them in the next couple of years about all of the information we have and try to select 2, 3, or 4 commercial denitrifying septic systems that combine good nitrogen removal, reasonable cost, and which can be offered to Falmouth residents as one of the solutions if they are not going to be sewered. I think that's enough.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm back here for a second on fertilizer.
Nope.
Nope.
Not yet.
Oh, Oyster Pond, you're up.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Eric.
can't read my own writing.
First, let me tell you some differences. In case you hadn't noticed, Oyster Pond is a place, not a technology. And it's not part of the CWMP that is being released this week. But Article 17 did provide funding to create a CWMP for Oyster Pond. And so the committee has been working on drafting a request for proposals to find an engineering firm that would do the necessary research and help us write a CWMP. It's following in the pipeline, therefore behind the southeastern estuaries, but it may be a model for the western estuaries, including, of course, the ones on Buzzards Bay. That the RFP has been prepared and will be posted sometime this summer. We've saved the town some money, we hope, by telling the contractor not to waste efforts considering oysters, ironically enough, or inlet widening for oyster pond, because the oyster pond is a brackish body of water that's incompatible with oysters, and opening it up to the sea would make it unacceptable for the river herring, which are a species of interest and not to be trifled with. And the residents don't like that idea either. Permeable reactive barriers are a possibility, but not a likely one because of the geometry and the geology. If you could go back to the previous slide. That teardrop-shaped light blue area, which contains oyster pond, see, it's really, especially in the lower part, rather narrow around the pond. So a permeable reactive barrier, in addition to being in the rocks near the water's edge, wouldn't collect, couldn't be amortized over very many households, so it's probably not a likely prospect. But we're not telling them to disregard that completely. The most likely candidate technologies are either connecting to the force main, if you go again back to that slide, I like pictures better than words. So the bike trail goes right between Oyster Pond and Vineyard Sound, and there's the force main there carrying the sewage from Woods Hole out to the blacksmith shop, farm, street facility. One possibility would be tapping into that. Another possibility would be cluster or individual denitrifying systems. And the former depends on approval of the outfall for the blacksmith shop farm facility, and the latter depends on the specific costs and efficiencies, as Wynn alluded to. We expect the chosen contractor to thoroughly research the feasible options, present us with specific costs and advantages and disadvantages. We also expect them to arrange a couple of public meetings and other means of public outreach to make sure that whatever method is chosen is what the majority desires.
Thank you, Steve. Now, I will jump in on fertilizer bylaw. You have before you pictures of what fertilizer does to the grass. That's also what it does to the estuaries. It turns them green. So we've committed ourselves to do a bylaw we hope to bring to the fall town meeting this year. A bylaw or regulation change or whatever, we haven't quite finalized what it's going to be yet, but its premise will be to how to reduce fertilizer use in the town of Falmouth. Fertilizer use is obvious, and it is totally unregulated at the moment. The previous effort in town was the Falmouth Friendly Lawn effort, which I'm sure everyone here was aware of it. We got postcards in the mail every year telling us that was a good thing to do, and many people probably did it, but there was no way of measuring the result of that effort because there was no way of measuring it. So for our purposes, we have to find measurable reductions in fertilizer. And so we've had a couple of sort of thoughts we've been playing around with. One sort of an easy one would be to talk to the town DPW and say, don't use fertilizer anymore. Okay, there's one. Another would be to have the Conservation Commission regulations changed to say you can't use fertilizer within 100 feet of a water body without a permission from the Conservation Commission. There's an idea. We've also thought about sort of possibly picking some target areas and trying to provide an economic incentive, a small one. Like, for example, you could send something out with the water bill that says, if you don't apply fertilizer to your lawn, we will give you a $10 credit on your water bill. Maybe, maybe not. For a targeted area, we could find out if that made any difference to people's behavior. It's a tough thing to do because we've looked around. Other places have talked about it quite a lot, but no other place has really put anything in effect that really produces measurable reduction in fertilizer. So it's a work in progress. If you're paying attention at the Fall Town Meeting, and we've done our job, we'll have some specific proposals on that subject then. Okay, now Virginia has the floor for quite a number of options. She's going to deal with the hard part, which is, how do we pay for this?
Well, first we're going to finish up with the engineering projects. This is the last one. There are 8 of them altogether. And the Little Pond area has been identified. We've identified a what we call an evaluation area, which is shown basically by this black dashed line that I'm roughly targeting. You're looking at a subset of the map, the large map that you saw at the beginning of the presentation. This shows just the Little Pond watershed, lower and upper, and then a portion of the Great Pond watershed. The red are parcels that are already on the sewer, to the existing sewer system. The yellow is basically the T-ticket area, largely businesses, that was identified back in 2001 as an area that definitely would benefit from sewering, and that had a very large input of nitrogen to the Little Pond, this is Little Pond, to the Little Pond estuary. And then the green, we are just looking at a subset of it. We're looking at Falmouth Heights and Mara Vista up to about Mara Vista Avenue. So that is what we've called the evaluation area. And on the next slide, there has been a preliminary evaluation done by GHD, the engineers who've prepared this draft, to give us an idea of what sewering might cost for this area. They identified that there are roughly 1,700 what they call equivalent sewer units. If you are a restaurant, you're obviously, if you're a house, you're 1 unit, but if you're a restaurant, depending on the number of seats, you're more units, and the same for commercial. They estimated a total of 290,000 gallons would come out of this area and would be treated at the West Falmouth plant. And they estimated that to sewer it with gravity sewers, and in some cases with sewers under pressure because of low-lying areas, the total would be $44 million. That would include also the work that is needed for the discharge site. Under the settlement that the town has now agreed with DEP, no more nitrogen loading can be added to the West Falmouth watershed. We can process water at the West Falmouth plant, but it has to be discharged outside of the watershed. And so there are various potential sites where that might be done. They are parcels north of the plant. There are parcels in East Falmouth. It's also been suggested the outfall is again a matter of an option. So those will need to be evaluated if sewering goes forward for Little Pond and this 290,000 gallons is added to the plant. The last few slides deal with the financing. All of the projects that we have mentioned so far, reactive barriers, inlet widening, sewering, those are all major multi-million-dollar construction projects. There needs to be some strategy for funding those capital costs. And there are 3 bullets here, and I'm going to talk about each one. The town, over the past 10, 20 years, has from time to time voted debt exclusions, and those bonds are now maturing. And the proposal is that as those bonds mature, new bonds be issued that would be of an equivalent amount, and therefore the cost in terms of taxes the taxes would not go up because the cost to pay off the bonds is already incorporated into the existing tax rate. The second bullet is the state revolving fund, which will offer communities on a competitive basis a 0 or 2% loan for as much as 30 years to fund projects that would manage nitrogen and improve the health of the estuaries. The 0% loan has a lot of extra requirements. The town is not sure, or the committee is not sure at this point whether we can actually meet those. And so that's another detail that is going to have to be explored carefully before we recommend an avenue to an approach. Third form of financing for capital costs is betterments. Traditionally, gravity sewers have had betterments, which means that any property that actually has the sewer collection system going in front of it, that property must connect to the sewer and must pay a certain portion of the capital costs. Town meeting votes what the percentage will be, 60% to the owner, 60% and 40% to the town, or 50-50. It could be any percentage. The kinds of projects that we're talking about, like inlet widening and permeable reactive barriers, it's much harder to allocate what properties directly benefit. And there are no state laws that deal with betterments for those situations. They've never arisen. So there needs to be a great deal of discussion at the community level about betterments before we know exactly how that piece of the financing plan would work. We have developed a sort of timeline for focusing on these issues, and the fall 2013 town meeting is suggested to be the time that the town focuses and begins to decide whether we're going to have betterments at all, and if so, how much and for what projects. This winter, when the committee was really in the thick of reviewing all of these alternatives that you've heard tonight, had a workshop which was attended by the Department of Environmental Protection, a representative from the EPA, and a representative from the Cape Cod Commission. And it was a very candid discussion. It was a nearly all-day workshop. That in order to deal with the magnitude of the problem that this town has, we need to do it in an adaptive way. We need to have time to integrate the information that we get from the pilot projects. We need to express as a town a commitment that we are moving forward on dealing with the excess nitrogen in the estuaries. And we need to look at where there are cost-effective solutions. We know that the Mara Vista and Falmouth Heights area is virtually at build-out. And so if there were a cost-effective sewer system, that would be the location that we would look at. This committee has also explored preliminarily that there are alternative types of sewers to just what we call the big pipe gravity sewer. There are several smaller diameter types of sewers. There are some that are pressure sewers. There's some with pumps that remain on the properties. So there's a great deal of detail that still needs to be developed and discussed with the selectmen and the town as a whole on what the sewer solution actually would be. When we look ahead, these are sort of key milestones and things that need to be accomplished in the next 12 months. We've actually developed a schedule that takes you out 10 years in great detail and even out 40 years. But as far as for the public to digest, let's just see what we need to do in the next 12 months. The first is that this draft needs to be discussed with the selectmen. The selectmen need to make their decision as to whether it will move on to be formally filed with the Department of Environmental Protection. We've given them a suggested date, but it's their decision as to when it will be submitted. Once it is submitted, that triggers a public comment period that is administered through the Massachusetts EPA. And they will generate questions and comments back to us, the town, which will need responses, and then we will send those back, and then they will review those responses. We are hoping that that process can be done in about 5 months by January 7th. Then you end up with I'm sorry. Well, we're nearly at the end. You end up with a document that's called the final Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan rather than the draft. And that final will also have a comment period. And then the secretary issues a certificate. And that's by March 31st, so that it's in time for the next town meeting, spring town meeting 2013. At spring 2013 meeting, the town will again have an opportunity to replace new debt with old debt. The town has many capital needs. Sewering is not the only capital need. And so that $9 million needs to be very carefully shaped in terms of what projects will be accomplished with that $9 million. We are looking for the sewer piece to have moved forward by receiving a certificate from the secretary by that town meeting. The secretary was in Falmouth at the time of signing the settlement and indicated to me that he thought that date could be met. As far as the very near term, Eric spoke about the fertilizer control bylaw. That's for this fall town meeting. I've already spoken about the April town meeting and the funding. That will be followed by a ballot vote, just as we did a year ago. It's a two-part process, approval by town meeting and then a ballot vote. And then our next target as a committee is to make sure that we have developed enough engineering information to be able to submit our list of projects to the DEP for their 0 or 2% funding. And the deadline for submitting that to get on their list, it's not an approval of the project, it's just to get on their list. That deadline is August 15th, 2013, just a little over a year from now. All right, that concludes our presentation, and I'll turn it back to Eric.
Just a couple of points that I've missed along the way. One is to introduce and thank Sia Karplus, our technical consultant. If you notice the competency of this presentation, it's entirely due to her. And Jerry Patamas, if you notice there are no mistakes in this, it's because Jerry checked every word just this morning to make sure that we had no mistakes. And we'll find out from the public if that's true. But we think you did a pretty good job, Jerry. Thank you. The process, as Virginia points out here, is the selectmen and then DEP. And as she's told you, this proposal, presuming it gets to this DEP in the same form it's in now, is pretty radical for DEP. DEP's practice in the past has been to say, whatever your problem is, the answer is to sewer. And that's the kind of plans that they have been approving in other towns in years past. Falmouth has been doing things differently for the last couple of years, and I think DEP is looking upon Falmouth as a demonstration project, if you will, of how to do it another way. Because they recognize you cannot go to the voters in every town with $600 million proposals and expect them to vote for it. And you cannot bludgeon them into doing it. And you have to have another way. Falmouth has, through this committee and the review committee and the town meeting and the voters, has laid out another way. We're hoping that it goes to the DEP and that they will approve it. But that is no slam dunk. They have their own institutional attitudes about these sort of things. So this is a bit of an experiment, but I think we're confident that we've done our homework and the town has backed this effort to the hilt. We're confident that when it gets up there, it'll get a fair hearing, and we look forward to a fruitful exchange of views with them and an approval of doing it Falmouth's way. So with that, I'd like to ask for any comments from anyone in the public, keeping in mind that the work product is done. We're happy to hear the comments, and I'm sure the enterprise will print the comments, and the selectmen who are here will be happy to hear them, but the work product is finished from our point of view. Mr. Finneran, the auxiliary member of this committee, who has been to more meetings than...
Perfect attendance record.
First off, I'd like to say that, and everybody's pretty much aware, there isn't a lot that goes on around here that I give my stamp of approval to. But I think in this case, there's room for everyone to be cautiously optimistic, especially if you look at what's gone on in the past few years. And I remember kind of a low point in this is when Matt came with an opportunity for a $500,000 grant from the state, and he was actually voted down by the Board of Selectmen. And I thought that was kind of a low point, and he's obviously worked his way up to the committee. He wasn't there in the beginning. And same with Ron. I mean, a great addition, and like I said, I'm cautiously optimistic and impressed with what's gone on. When we started out with a proposal for a $650 million sewer plant, which I'm glad we kind of all came down and agreed it was outrageous. And like I said, I'm happy with what's going on here, and I'm not afraid to say so, but I'm still going to keep my eye on you, every one of you. Thank you.
Did you get that, Chris? Okay. Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, sir. Just hang on a second, Catherine. Go ahead.
Am I recognized?
Yes, please.
Yes, Dave?
Give your name.
My name is David Sykes. I'm a resident of Treetops at Oyster Pond, and this is just a suggestion of something to consider. It's not an advocacy position on my part because I don't know enough about it to advocate it, except that I have recently installed water-saving toilets in our house, and I'm impressed with how dramatic a reduction in the water use occurs. The typical old 1980s style toilet took about 4 gallons per flush. The new code requires for new construction and when things are redone in your house that your new toilet operate with 1.6 gallons per flush, which is a 60% reduction in the amount of water. Now, of course, reducing the amount of water doesn't really do anything for the amount of nitrogen. We all
That's right.
realize that. But the question I have is, what does it do to the cost of removing that nitrogen from the water? And furthermore, as it so happens, the toilets that I installed are 20% better than that 60%. They actually are down to 1.28 gallons per flush, which is about 68% reduction. If you look at the numbers, you'll find, I guess, that some 80% of the nitrogen is in urine, and that the so-called black water component of the wastewater problem, which is basically the toilet water, represents about 30% of the total volume of wastewater. And so that if you were to convert and the other thing that you need to keep in mind is that these new toilets really don't cost very much. If you look at them in terms of the millions and billions of dollars that we're talking about, the cost of these things is kind of peanuts. When the fella came to put a new toilet in my place, from the time he knocked on the door with his toolkit in his hand till he drove out the driveway with the job done was 20 minutes. So this is not a huge amount, not a huge big deal. but it makes a tremendous difference in the amount of water, so that all the pipe sizes for these big pipes and for the small pipes and whatever else all get reduced on the average throughout the town. I think if you take the 68% of 30%, you end up with a 20% or so reduction in the total amount of sewage that you've got to transport to the site. Well, that's got to save somebody a whole poke of money. And so I just wanted to offer that as a suggestion, as something that you might want to consider as a part of this problem. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Any comment from the committee? Matt? I didn't recognize you in your new shirt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sykes makes some great points, and I just, we're in the eco-toilet area, we are looking at that. We actually, some of these composting toilets will be fitted with conventional-looking toilets that use about 3 ounces of soapy water. So the water savings is as dramatic as you can get with those. But I think the concentrations of nitrogen are always going to remain the same, no matter, right? The pounds per pounds of nitrogen will always remain the same. And I don't know how it will. I'll let the engineers talk about whether it's easier to move
So you addressed
those
the question.
components.
I wrote it down. And I'd like to address your question.
Great, thank you. Catherine, as the lady approaches the microphone, I'll point out Doug Brown, a former member of the review committee, has apparently not had enough of wastewater. He's here with us tonight, and thank you for your work in the past.
I'm Catherine Bumpus. Something has come to my attention today, and it just caught a little bit when Mr. Lighton said connecting at Oyster Pond was contingent upon an outfall being approved, and Virginia saying that the outfall pipe is back on the table. I hear a lot about this because my husband's grandfather in 1971 was an advocate for the outfall. I think he would say that 41 years later, our understanding of environmental processes has changed, and I'm really sorry to hear more discussion of outfalls again, and I think it's unfortunate that it's being brought back up.
Thank you for your comment. I would suggest you read the portion of the report that the committee devoted to that subject, because I think you'll find it illuminating. Michael McGrath.
My name is Michael McGrath. I'm a registered engineer and professional land surveyor. I think you know I also sell an innovative alternative system called the RUC system. It's small scale up to 45,000 gallons per day. I also, it's little known, but I was a co-founder of a company that makes an organic carbon for denitrification, a company called Environmental Operating Solutions. They make the micro-seed product. I'm not affiliated with them. I'm not employed by them. I own 1% of the stock, but I feel like a father very proud of his child because they removed tons of dissolved nitrogen from water across America. I wasn't going to speak, but one of the problems with the alternative, innovative on-site denitrifying septic system is the concentration of total nitrogen in the raw wastewater is much, much higher than DEP has used. I've looked at 5 tests of raw total nitrogen in the last 2 weeks. I have 4 over 100 and 1 at 54. If you look at my website, I guarantee we'll remove at least 80%. With our new design, I have a system in Quissit that's removing over 95% of total nitrogen. So there are systems existing that remove a lot of total nitrogen. But in any case, I applaud your efforts, and I hope that it's flexible because there are things coming that will help the town meet and reduce total nitrogen and help the town and get the townspeople involved. Because some of this appears to be a black box to most people, and it doesn't have to be. But in any case, thank you.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Jane Abbott, the Queen of Waquoit. The Mayor of Waquoit.
This is just a subject that's dear to my heart. Matt, I wasn't sure you gave the gentleman about the reduced water a really concise answer, because there's a little water, but there's still a lot of nitrogen, and it might be fine if it's going to the sewer, but if it's going into the septic system, it's not good.
Right, I mean, but I'll just jump in here. I took his question as saying, if you can cut down the amount of water that's carrying the waste to the wastewater plant, how does that affect how the wastewater
Just to
plant
the wastewater plant, yeah.
will operate? I just reflected on Mike's comments about 100 milligrams per liter, begged me to almost ask Mike a question, how many water-saving toilets might be at the location he's getting 100, and where's the correlation between certain types of developments, water-saving concentrations, and ultimately pounds and pounds is what we're all trying to track down where are the pounds and how to reduce the number of pounds to get in the estuary.
I guess I'm just thinking more about alternatives than the sewer.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Jerry Patamas, wastewater superintendent.
I wanted to comment a little bit on the water-saving toilets. They've been around for a while, and it's good that people are now starting to think about their use. Maybe we'll even offer to buy one for every household, I don't know. But it's not going to reduce the general size of the pipes in the ground for a variety of reasons. It will reduce the size of the pumps. It will reduce the capacity at the treatment plant. It could reduce the size of the infiltration galleries we need to put wastewater. But don't expect your water bill to go down that much, because there are fixed costs on your water and wastewater. And you could cut your water by 50%, but your water bill and your wastewater bill from O&M costs may not go down. I know two people are saying I'm getting into the weeds, but there's no free lunches.
No free lunches and no free water. We got it. Hilda.
Hilda Menge. I also would like to thank you for all your work. And I'm very glad that at least one component is actually looking at resource recovery, because most of the conversation I heard today again, and through all the meetings I've been sitting in, has been how to get rid of the nitrogen over and over, how to get rid of it. And the resource recovery is what I think is one of the most critical issues that we have to face in this town, on Cape Cod, in this nation, and on the planet. And as long as we keep throwing away our nutrients, it will never be sustainable and it will never be economical. Because in the long run, we have to hold on to our nutrients. We cannot first pay for them, then flush them away, and then pay for cleaning them up and trying to recover them by throwing them in the wrong place. So I'm glad that at least Eco Toilets is the only one that will recover the resources. And I think there should be much more emphasis given on that for that particular reason, that we no longer can throw away our nutrients. And nitrogen is a big issue, but phosphorus is one of the biggest issues. We are running out of phosphorus in this world, and it's not something we can ever make or retrieve. Once it's in the ocean, it's gone for millions and millions of years. And the food production is completely reliant on phosphorus. And so that is one of the main reasons why I'm working on this so hard, and why other people are working on this. But I thank you for at least including one section on that particular part of the problem.
Thank you, Hilda.
I would like to say that one of the reasons I applied to be on this committee in the first place, and one of the reasons I reluctantly accepted the chairmanship of the Eco Toilet Subcommittee, is specifically because I also am very interested in resource recovery. And so I think we are not focusing this year on resource recovery. We're focusing on getting the eco-toilets tested, because it will be a while before there's a lot of resources to recover from eco-toilets. But as we go forward, I think it's crucial that we start thinking about how we will do resource recovery if and when we install more eco-toilets. That's a crucial part of the program, to get to think of eco-toilets and other alternatives of this sort as a system. The sewers are a system. They're worked out. It's a whole system of regulations and techniques and so forth. There's also a system for eco-toilets and other similar things. That system has to be set up and operational with all of the necessary regulations understood, with the people trained to do it, with people understanding what they're doing. That's what we really are trying to do in the long run.
Thank you. Ron?
Yeah, there's also a second resource recovery dimension to this, and that is the aquaculture, of course, because we will be demonstrating directly in the estuaries. We'll be taking up nitrogen, improving water quality that way. And so it will not only generate the oysters, but also jobs and money, and as well as carbon dioxide sequestration in the shell. So there's also even an atmospheric dimension to this, in that it's another prong to our multi-pronged approach to the issues we're dealing with.
Ron, what is the phosphorus?
Excuse me, Matt.
Sorry.
I wanted to publicly recognize Hilda Menge and Earl Barnhart for their actually getting into years of work that they've put into this project, and they've really educated a great many people in town and on this committee, so thank you for your work.
Yes, thank you you have done well by us, and we appreciate it.
I had a question for Ron about the aquaculture. What about the uptake of phosphorus? Because once it ends up in the estuary, I don't know how we can get a hold of the phosphorus.
Well, the phosphorus is a component of the growth of the phytoplankton, and then that is incorporated into the growth of we all have phosphorus in us. Oysters have phosphorus in us. So we have some in us, and it can be it's a way of getting it out of the estuaries directly, and then what happens with that later is of course, a number of options for capturing it back. Even for that we have 10 years of phosphorus and nitrogen in the groundwater probably. Now if we stopped it going in today, and that's still going to be moving, so it's a way of dealing with it in that way.
That's true.
Thank you. Doug Brown.
Hello, Doug Brown. Currently a member of the Board of Faces, and I've been on there for quite a while. And we've been watching carefully, and you guys have been working hard, and I appreciate it. We've been anxiously awaiting this moment when you're going to release this study to the selectmen and hopefully to the state. And we're glad to see that the thing keeps moving forward. We've been advocating for some kind of sewer plan for a long time, and all along we thought it was going to be all sewering, and that's changing. That's good. I'm glad that you kept a component of sewering in the dense part of town, and I would hate to see our efforts come to a stall, so I'm glad you're going forward on both tracks, and you've done a great job, and this looks like a great plan, and I hope it goes right along. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir.
Steve Moore, Pheasant Lane here in Falmouth. I'd like to know, as part of the details, which we don't have in our little brochures, is the Falmouth Country Club being excluded as a dump site or a reinjection site for our water, for the Little Pond area?
It's not recommended as our first choice, but it's not excluded. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's probably low on the priorities. It would bring it all the ways from West Falmouth all the ways back.
Is there an economic justification for that, or a geologic justification?
It'd be an economic. You'll see it in the details rather than debate it tonight. Yes,
Okay.
that's a worthwhile question.
Is it in that report there?
It should be in the past history on how much it would take to transport it all the ways over to the country club and then re-inject it. And then you have to take that much more nitrogen out of that watershed because you're putting it back into that watershed. The ideal solution is you introduce nitrogen into a watershed that is not impaired outside of West Falmouth. Therefore, the level of treatment and the amount of sewering that's needed goes down. But I'd be happy to discuss this.
Well, I'm curious about our $15 million investment.
15 of it.
We purchased a country club primarily for use for future wastewater treatment, and we're not going to be using it for that.
The investment is sound. We won't be able to develop it. It will avoid nitrogen from lack of development. I don't think.
It also loses taxes. For
Okay,
that.
well, we're not going to sit here and debate the country club purchase at this point here. Steve, do you want to say something about the option?
I want to come and respond a little bit, if I could, Steve, to a little bit on the bigger picture, not just to the country club. Early in the presentation, we talked about a decision was made a while back that we would not build a new treatment plant out at the Mass Military. That we'd stay at the existing site we have. And we've touched upon the fact that stay at the existing site we have, we will have to find and identify additional sites for disposal of any more wastewater that's brought to that plant. So far, the exercise has been to identify potential sites and make sure they remain reserved for that use, but to look at the most economical sites for the next component. So if the next component's a couple 100,000 gallons, as you say, for Little Pond, and we have a site that's close to the existing plant, but is outside of the West Falmouth watershed that can be developed as a recharge zone, it's economically viable to do that first. If 10 or 12 or 15 years from now, we find ourselves having to extend the sewer area and now need to find another recharge area, there are only so many of them that we've sort of highlighted so far, including the country club as one of those sites. But the cost to get, as Jerry started to explain, from the West Falmouth plant back to the country club site may be more expensive, well, actually is more expensive from how we've looked at it so far, than going to the site that's closer. But the capacity of the closer site is still yet to be fully worked out. That leads to the issue that Catherine raised, which is it better go to landfill? So one of the engineering tasks, one of the open items that will be worked on over the next year or so is more about what really
Right,
happens
but
with the effluent.
one of my problems with this whole process is, over the last 6 or 8 years, 9 years that I've been going through it, is we've identified and purchased a number of parcels based solely on our use as wastewater, to use those parcels for wastewater treatment. And we have it, and we're not going to from the looks of it.
I would hold up, maybe we're not going to till we get down the road.
Yeah, we're certainly not that far along to say we're not going to, but any
we
other
want- we
comments or
want to
questions? Michael McGrath?
I wanted to respond to two things. You asked, or one member asked, was the systems that had the very high nitrogen levels, concentrations, they were all new construction. I have retrofitted a couple of old houses, and the lowest numbers seem to be about 60 milligrams per liter of total nitrogen as an average. I don't have that many data sets. The other point is that traditionally, when man's treated wastewater, he's discharged treated effluent that has very little carbon that's available. And so the nitrogen that's in the plume has traveled great distances. And I think we're going to find out in the next 10 years that if we add carbon back, the plumes won't go as far. Plus, at the same time, we have reached a point where the nitrogen that's in the treated effluent is very low. So it may well be that we will be able to use other sites in the future that are being ruled as unfeasible now for one reason or another. So this will not block us from using in the future some of the sites that we may have purchased.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions from the public before we get to Jerry here? Sir.
My name is Paul Dreyer, Precinct 2. Excuse me. As a board-certified environmental engineer, I know a little bit about these issues, and I've been following them very closely. I've attended several of your meetings, as you know. I just want to express my compliments to the committee and how they've addressed so many technical and financial issues. It was very impressive to attend those meetings. Look forward to the report, and I'm very pleased to see you're considering all options. On behalf of the town, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions from the public? Jerry?
Just some administration. The draft was released to the selectmen this evening for their ability to comment on it. I have extra copies of this draft which I'll make available to the main library and the East Falmouth Library, and possibly the West Falmouth Library. The two private libraries in the past have said they have enough space, they really can't deal with it. I also have a CD of this entire thing, which we can post on the website within the next couple of days, so that people can look at the chapters that are most appropriate. And I think I haven't discussed it fully with the committee. We can come up with an executive summary of the first couple of chapters possibly, so people can have the Reader's Digest condensed version of what's really in here. You know, most of it is technical for the regulators. There's probably 200 pages that are the meat of what we're doing, including schedules.
Thank you very much. Okay, any comments from the committee before we accept the motion to adjourn?
Good job, Mr. Chairman.
I move that we adjourn.
Yes. Thank you, Matt.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We got it. Thank you very much for coming.
Can you tell us where you get the